welcome to our listeners, friends, family, and trolls. It's time for another rousing episode of the Tech4Good live podcast. If you're new here, it's a podcast all about using technology to do some social good. On today's show, we'll be looking at the release of the Tech Talent Charter report. In short, if you're a woman in tech, everything is still crap. We'll also be looking at Nikki Morgan's 5 principles to make tech work for everyone. Principle 1 is probably there's no such thing as principle worth sticking to, and principle 2 is let's all eat the poor. I did not write these lines. Johnny did. We'll also be looking at a great project by the Brain and the Spinal Injury Center. Joining me in this descent into reckless misadventure, we have Greg Ashton. Greg is one of the most recognizable members of the Tech4Good live team. He's tall, has a beard, wears tight trousers, and looking into his cold, weary, and lifeless eyes is like looking into the abyss. Is that why? And I guess this is probably why he's getting married soon.
Yes, I've worn it down with my abyss-filled eyes and my tight trousers.
It depends which order. It depends how it goes.
Producer Paul is in the studio as always. Paul is the least recognizable member of the Tech4Good live team. So mean. Because he's so mysterious. No one outside the team has ever seen his face. Unless you're on Instagram. He's like the Masked Singer, except he's talented, relevant, and I could try to figure him out forever. Is he the canal pusher, or is that a conspiracy theory? Don't at me. And I'm Hira Hossain, and I'll be your host today. I'm super identifiable in both the Tech4Good live team and the world of tech more generally, because I'm not white and I'm not a man. And we have a guest with us today. Yes, and applause. So our guest today is going to be Dan Sodergren. Dan, who are you and what do you do?
Well, thank you very much for letting me on the show. I'm also brown, by the way. Quick one on this one. So yeah, hooray, Tech4Good.
Thank you. Very well today.
We're hitting those quotas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hitting those quotas.
Diversity,
it's all white
inclusion.
from here now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Just unzip and guess what? I've got a bit. Very hipster. No, so yeah, I'm not only being brown and working in tech, which is quite cool, but also do bits of stuff on the BBC as the kind of tech and sometimes digital marketing guy they go to, mainly because I live nearby. I'm just very cost effective.
What? I live nearby too. I live in Media City. Well, no one ever calls me.
Let's get you on more. Let's get you on more. But even if you want to be getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do the review of the papers, I'm sure there'll be slots that are available. Because not everyone does. Certainly not on New Year's Day, which is like what I did. Much to the chagrin of my wife, and also who didn't even bother to watch. But anyway, so I do some TV work. I also work at The Landing, so about Media City. So the Tech and Innovation Hub there, and I help tech companies grow there, and we work with a variety of different brands. So I've known tech in Manchester for about 20 years or so. So not only, I'm even old. There you go. Maybe that's another diversity thing.
Yeah, get the old
as well. Get the olds as well. I'm 43, so hopefully that's another tick in the box.
You do not look 43. That's
I've got the face for radio, so thank you. You're a star for that.
So we have some stats of the week.
Yeah, speaking about diversity, Tech Talent Charter report has been released. So the report surveyed over 700,000 employees of over 300 companies and discovered that women made up only 16% of the tech workforce in the UK. Members of the Tech Talent Charter, though, have a 24% female tech workforce. So still not great, but they were very happy with those results. They were happy that they had worked closely with their partners and had managed to push those figures up. One interesting thing that I read in that report was around the way that they have been really quite ruthless with handling those members, and if members are being a bit cagey about numbers or not hitting targets, they're happy to just cull them and kick them out if they're not responding to their support. On the other side of this, at the launch of this report, Baroness Nikki Morgan has outlined 5 principles to make tech work for everyone, so to introduce more diversity into tech. Yeah. Obviously, Johnny was quite judgmental of these.
Yeah, very. I think that for me, the principles seem sensible. So the first one is a pro-technology government. So I think that's good. Sharing the benefits of tech, pro-innovation regulation, protecting the vulnerable and ensure safety and security online, and free and open internet. I like that in the last one, those listeners who've heard me in the last few episodes will know I'm all about open data and transparency. So it was good to see that it was open internet there as well, because people often talk about free internet and they forget that if there's it's how Facebook was doing its like free internet project in India, where you had to have a Facebook account to go to internet. That's not really free, is it?
Yeah, just how free is it?
So what does our skeptic of the team think about these 5 principles?
Someone actually raised with me, they were like, oh, does it really need the free and open internet? Isn't that like a given? I was like, hell no. That is not a given. I'm really quite glad that they've included that in there.
You've not seen the last 3 years of where it's going to end up. So, I think you need to kind of protect that one as got a absolutely key fundamental. Yeah, absolutely.
Agree. There was a whole fight around taking over, taking down the hyperlink, which I think, is the chain that keeps everything together. So, so for me, I think they seem like they're good. I'm always nervous when there are principles, because the government love releasing principles.
Yeah.
It's the shiny thing. It's like high level principles.
They're a great marketing device, and without being too fundamentally simple about things, at the end of the day, the government have a policy they need to do its marketing and put it into simple terms people will get. So 5 principles are always good. It's actually from a human point of view, will they make a huge amount of difference, and actually what will they do next? Now, the stats that you had there about the lack of diversity in tech is a hugely deep issue. And actually, at the landing, we have lots of tech companies that are growing. And we find, and also, if you look at the VC, they're looking at the venture capital stuff behind it, if you haven't got a diverse team, your product isn't as good, and you won't get you actually ironically might get more funding, but you actually get less success in non-diverse teams. So I think it's funny that tech is not following the money.
Yeah,
because I've got a couple of interests, and one of them is Flock, which is an HR and recruitment tech piece.
Oh,
one of the things
had.
you had Mikel?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've had him on the podcast.
There you go. Well, good guy. Now, our thing, and it's been my thing for quite a long time, is I'd love to find a female CTO. Absolutely love to, because that would make it a better product, and that would we want to employ someone like that. But it's really hard to find them. The point is not a wish by the companies to get more diverse people into tech. Is actually the recruitment pool is not necessarily there some of the time, and certainly from our thing. But we also find at the landing, certainly things like health tech. I'm just trying to give you some good news as well as bad news, basically. You're saying, yes, exactly. You're saying if it was because it's 16%, did you say?
Yeah. In the wider group, so for those that have signed up to the charter, it's 24%. So they've managed to provide them with learning and education on how to improve those figures.
It would be fascinating to see how that broke down a little bit more. So I think there'll be certain sectors of tech which are worse than others. I mean, we could almost guess which ones they're going to be. And I say worse in a kind of inverse, but I do actually mean worse. But then obviously there are going to be other ones that are better. So let's say, for example, in health tech, we just did the GM Future of Health over at the landing with Google and Novartis and other folk. And there were about, was it 50, 60% of the people on that were women? Now, is that just luck, or is the fact that we actually, I said we need to get more people like this? And however, we've done other ones with other organisations, and it's very hard to get more women onto those accelerators. But that's what we've got to start doing. We've got to aggressively market. I hate to say that word, that terminology, but we've got to do more stuff. We've got to stop talking about it. It's a problem. You've actually got to say, okay, cool. And people don't like these things called quotas, and I'm going to get some boos from the crowd. I understand, that's cool. But we do need to have them, by the way.
I think quotas are very effective.
Hooray! Good.
I actually think quotas are effective in changing the tone of the conversation. I would, however, take issue with what you said, which is, controversy. Which is, I'm doing it myself. Which is...
I mean, she really is, because no one else went really controversial.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't see it as controversial at all. It's just you.
Thank you.
Which is fine.
So, I think that it's not always a pipeline issue. So from what I've seen, I'm in many women in tech groups in the UK, in Pakistan, where I'm from, in the US, where a lot of my my nonprofits work is, and there is an abundance of really talented people who are looking for jobs and opportunities, especially looking for opportunities to be promoted within their organizations. But it's that the creativity and just the whole infrastructure an ecosystem of how we hire people or promote people in tech is really flawed. And it is that you might have the perfect person there, but if they don't look and sound and behave in a certain way, if they don't give out like alpha nerdy vibes, how nerdism is perceived, or
there's a lot of this. I mean, there's more controversial terms there than there was in the rest of it. I mean, that's fair.
Or alpha male vibes and leadership. You just don't get hired, and I think that's the real travesty.
But that's why Flock is such a good project, because it aims to avoid all of that and really look at that value-based hire, where it is about culture fit, but culture fit in the right way that is positive, that is less about the look and the sound of that person and more about...
That shouldn't be the way you recruit someone. I know I don't work in recruitment, we work with recruiters, but and I'm sure maybe it hasn't changed as much as it should do, but it's changed a bit, I think. Like the whole Blink principles, and you don't necessarily have people's names on documents and things. I don't know the ins and outs here, but this is what I've heard. Your point's a really good one, though, that inside larger companies, I imagine it's much harder, and again, I don't have the data for this, but it might be much harder to get promoted in those places or actually get recruited into those kind of places, because bizarrely, their cultures and their values are to kind of stop it, kind of institutionally kind of stop you from doing that, because they prefer to have dicks who are nerdy people who are without being rude about it, who are dicks. Now that doesn't, but we've known now in tech that doesn't work. It doesn't produce good code. It doesn't produce collaboration. You have to have collaborative thinking. You have to be a better person to produce a better product in the end of the day. But maybe those times are changing. But certainly for startups, I think, and by the way, if you know lots of women who want to be a CTO of a small startup who can't pay a huge amount of money, please do, because we will recruit you tomorrow. Because I think that's really important for Flock. So yes, if you
I will definitely post it in all of the women in tech lists that I'm on.
Mikhail, the dream's going to come true. Brilliant. Okay, good.
And I mean, speaking of tech and community, some of our listeners will have noticed we started a Slack channel, which is amazing, and you should totally join it, Dan. And Greg has been running a really tight ship with Bex on our Slack channel by posting a lot of articles and asking people their Tech4Good news. Is there anything that we got this week from our community?
Yeah, so there was a really interesting one from, let me just double check the name. So PMs, who has just started working at Brain and Spinal Injury Center, Basic. And there's some fantastic terms here. So he works for Basic, and they're working on a project called Karen, Computer Assisted Rehabilitation Environment, which is like classic 90s sci-fi naming.
Karen.
Karen.
Absolutely.
Hello, Karen.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, Greg.
There's always a Karen.
Yeah, literally, it sounds like she's going to have some sort of AI persona. But this is... So there's a lot of work going into this. I've seen a number of different projects around this, using AI as a rehabilitation tool. I think there's a startup in Manchester that's been working on it with sports and sports stars. So I saw
AI and VR, or just AI by
VR. So using VR for sports injuries.
There's a very famous couple in Cambridge and Oxford as well that have been doing it for quite a while. But I mean, it's for loads of different stuff. This is what the joy of VR is going to be.
Yeah.
It gets past its lack of 5G and the latency problems from people being ill. It opens up this amazingly emotive experience, which not only can potentially heal things like
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. PTSD, and also really beautifully make people more empathetic in loads of different situations. So, I'm a great believer.
The great thing about this is you don't necessarily need it to be massively portable, so it's accessible now because you can put someone in kind of a lab environment, and so they use it for rehabilitation for people with disabilities to practice real life situations in safe, controlled environments. I've heard of explorations into using this for autism and all sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. We've also got the Children's Society. I had a coffee before I came on the show, but I also got very excited. Oh my goodness, yes! So one of the Vodafone winners of the competition they did with the landing and worldwide, it was the Children's Society, and they are doing exactly that, using VR for autism and for children to help rehabilitate children who have been adopted or fostered and those kind of things. I believe so. Yes, we're doing it right now.
That's a lot more exciting than the Black Mirror episode in which people lose their minds.
Yeah.
Well, remember,
imaginary. Yeah, it's a lot better than that. Yeah. I remember there was a lot of interest in virtual reality a few years back, or actually more a decade back, and I then remember it dwindling quite a bit. And then, for a few years, like there was nothing really happening, or things were happening, but they weren't coming to the like consumer end of it. So it's really nice to see, practical projects like this one that are really, trying to do good with it. And it's going beyond the very basic, here, see what the universe is like. Though that is important. And I do recommend we teach people more things. You know what I would love to do? If I had all the money in the world, and let's say I had the best team in like virtual reality, I would create simulations from like ancient, from ancient times. So different civilizations and different parts of the world. Because I think a lot of the ignorance that we see, and I am massively taking this off from assisting patients to
yeah, you've gone down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, but I think a lot of the ignorance around cultural heritage of different parts of the world is because books are written for certain regions. I grew up in Pakistan, but the education system was still controlled by Oxford University because I did English education. And I remember reading a lot more about the Greeks and the Romans than I did about the Persians and the, the different empires that were in the continent of Africa, which I absolutely know nothing about.
Dark Ages, as they were called beautifully by certain people.
Yeah, but
and
imagine...
all of a sudden it was awful. It was awful for ages. And then it was okay again. Hooray!
Exactly. But imagine if you could go back and see what those people's life was like and the kind of innovations that they had. We know all of this stuff, but it's like stuck in museums or in like these JSTOR articles that, not a lot of people read.
They've been talking about that for years, haven't they? It's been an educational tool, but I guess it's as you were saying, like the kind of connectivity issues and the latency and all that sort of stuff. It's coming up to speed now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
the stuff of the Madman's Dream is going to happen. And it was making me smile that you said 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, I had an augmented reality company, Go Augmented. It was like one of the first little, flurries into AR. It was, it's going to be so exciting. And then we worked for Blipper and we worked for Man City and all these other. And of course, tens of thousands of pounds later, I'm then broke and great. We'll start again.
Is Blipper still around?
Well, it became a unicorn and now it went back. Well, did it go bankrupt? I think it was just saved from itself by the very people who started. So make of that what you will. It hasn't got 160 employees anymore. Sorry, Rich. I wasn't being rude to you there, Rich, because you're a good friend. And Jessica Butcher, those people back in the day, we were before the thing. But the reason why I was smiling so much is, yes, you had that first bit of the hype curve, and I tend to be fooled by hype curves. So I'm talking about smart cities and the quantified self and all this stuff, which is 5 years ahead. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point being is that if we can, as soon as you've got that second curve, because then technology catches up, actually all the fun stuff you could do. So now it's cheap enough for people to use in education. But it wasn't before.
Yeah.
So you can now do all the stuff you're talking about. In fact, the reason why Double Smart, if you look at the stuff that's happening in the Mobile World Congress this year, look at what Huawei are doing. One of their projects is purely what you just talked about.
Oh, amazing.
Is using
I'll
VR
check it out.
with 5G, so you can walk around Mesopotamic ruins and all sorts of Chinese stuff and African stuff. Absolutely, that's what they're doing. So
I would love that.
I will try to I was just looking at my phone there, desperately trying to find the link. I will put it on the Slack channel.
Oh, great.
That's
a good brownie points for you.
Thank you. I did try. I wanted to try.
Yeah, I think you're quite right on that. Like something like this level of technology, like 5 years ago even, using VR just wouldn't have been accessible for a charity. But things have moved a lot and there's that realization that these kind of tools can be used for this kind of thing.
So you can buy them now for like $400, can't you? I mean, it's just insane compared to what you could have done, 5 years ago. So 10 years ago, God, I mean, that it is literally will change the future of work. But I hope it changes the future of people's lives first before it changes the future of work. But there's some fascinating stuff that you can start looking at with the future of work around. I believe that we're all going to be kind of agnostic from a reality point of view. Like you have the mouse. I warned you I might go on a rant, sorry. You've got the mouse that then with Excel documents and it's changed how people do business. We think about it from a VR point of view. We've got companies that are landing that are visualizing data. So your business plan becomes like an artwork. So you can see that bit of purple equals this. And then you can start playing around with it and you pull it around. And then it's just a completely different way of thinking about the concept of what a business plan is and also what finances are. Because actually they are more amorphic and more moving than you think. It becomes quite a box
of a screen.
It is. It's quite a beautiful thing. Okay, sorry.
Do you know what I was thinking? We managed to talk about virtual reality, augmented reality without being a downer about it, which
Yeah, that was
is
pretty
really
good.
an accomplishment for
taken
the,
us
3
years.
Yeah.
Well,
it's amazing.
I've only been on once. So let's be fair.
And you know what I just realized? My first job after graduating from Glasgow Uni was in augmented reality, and I was fired from it.
Well, there's a downer. Oh,
Wow.
There we go. I was fired from it not because they didn't have any work for me, and they were like, "We're just paying you."
Hype curve.
The hype curve's gone. That sounds like Go Augmented. So they're like, oh, there's no more work left. All the early adopters have gone, we'll cross the chasm. Oh, no, we won't. Anyway, that's the thing. So, yes, the work is there now, though. That is the exciting thing. And if you read the newest report from Digital Catapult, it's very buoyant, of course, as it would be from the government saying it. But I think bringing it back onto Tech4Good, it's actually in those areas where good can be done, where actually is going to be more exciting than just in the kind of traditional education and training models. It actually could be some really powerful stuff for human beings. So that I'm all for it.
So on the subject of powerful stuff for human beings, a necessary evil that we talk about is Facebook. But Greg, you found something good.
Yeah, for once they've been proactive. So obviously there's everything that's happening, not just in China, but across the world now with the coronavirus. But I think what's been interesting about this is more than some of the other outbreaks, and I'm not sure why that is, or whether it's being reported more by the news, but there definitely seems to be this kind of wildfire of misinformation that's suddenly sprung up around it. And very quickly, towards the end of Jan, the Facebook and Instagram took that proactive step to say they were going to start removing misinformation in relation to coronavirus, which is completely out of character for them, because normally they just wash their hands of everything.
Well, was that washing your hands as a
Oh, yeah.
Very good. We said we wouldn't joke about it too much, but you're quite right. I mean, I don't know, is it I've just got to be careful with words here. Is it just well timed with everything else that's happening in the world that they've started to use? This is the moment where they've used it. Yeah. I'm a bit of a personal worry about, and I'm not, by the way, if it becomes a much bigger thing, I apologise. But, there were several of these. I'm 43. I remember several of these things that happen, and they tend to come from the same place. And it tends to be, wasn't swine flu, and then there was bird flu, and then there was going to be SARS, and then there was, you could almost. Is it every 4 years? Another one? I have no idea.
I think the most recent one we had was the Ebola outbreak.
Oh, yes. God, yeah. Okay,
and you had people, so there was that nurse, I think, that was being quarantined. So it stretched outside the realms of where it had originated. But I kind of felt like at the time there wasn't that much kind of fear and kind of information being passed around about the Ebola virus. It was kind of like, but like it didn't feel like everyone was, wearing masks and looking at each other with this abject fear.
Yeah, but with SARS and stuff, was it not very similar? What I'm trying to get to is the bit where, social media, obviously we all know, plays a huge influence in these moments. Now, is it Facebook suddenly realising that actually they have a bit of a responsibility? I would love to think that that's the case. But if that's the case, thanks for Brexit, things like that. There's lots of other stuff they could have stepped in and done things with. It just seems a bit odd that they pick coronavirus. I just don't. I'm not going to bring a conspiracy onto a conspiracy, but I just think it's odd times. But maybe they're just being good. Hooray!
Well, speaking about conspiracies, one person that I admire a lot is Jane Litvinenko from BuzzFeed, and she writes about disinformation. She investigates, hoaxes, memes, fake news, and conspiracy theories going around about all sorts of matters for BuzzFeed, and she tweets them out. So she's been tweeting a lot about the coronavirus as well. And one of the really interesting things she tweeted out and wrote about is that there's a site that's tied to Steve Bannon, and it's writing fake news about the coronavirus. And there's all sorts of political things happening. So it's a really interesting piece on BuzzFeed. We'll post it into our Slack. So there's another reason to join Slack. But, have a look at that and follow Jane if you're on Twitter, because she is routinely posting about it. Even like forward WhatsApp messages, she takes screenshots and you can report them to her as well. So I thought it was really important work that she's doing.
The one that I always find, and again, it's probably a bit much, but there's another one called Full Fact, which I believe
amazing organization.
Love those guys.
That's where I got my stuff. And then I was sitting there thinking, But what happens if your plan was to infiltrate that organisation as a different organisation?
No.
And then, who polices the police, man? Who polices the police? Which I realise I'm not really helping.
They were hiring a couple of weeks ago.
But who did they hire? Wasn't me. That's fine. No, so I think it's quite an interesting, in the world of fake news as it gets more and more prolific. I think I was on Scottish radio a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the dangers of 5G. They were talking about the fact, which we've got in media city and other places, and there was something that because folk have done it, and they were talking about it was killing the bees and stuff. It's the reason why I'm stumbling, because it's such a silly concept. But and actually, she had every right to think these things only because she's learnt them. So she learnt the fact that it kills bees, it's killing pigeons, it kills everything. She didn't really like 4G. She didn't really like those things because she was allergic to electromagnetic fields. She'd just come back from the Amazon, realised that she was then allergic to all these things. Now, two or three things. Number one, really sorry for her that is the case. And if she has got that condition, that's quite rare, and that's appalling, and I'm sorry for it. But we can't necessarily stop the whole of technology based on that.
Also has absolutely no scientific basis, in fact.
The other problem I had with it was it's got nothing to do with science.
Pseudoscience.
This is insane. But of course, you can't say on radio, you can't go, oh, I'm sorry, you might be, no offence, but where did you learn that? Now, of course, I did say, where did you learn it? Not you're insane, where did you learn it? But, where did you learn it? And she said, of course, Facebook. I've got this is all the stuff that I got from Facebook.
It's crazy. On Instagram, the amount of educated people that are buying crystals and essential oils thinking that they will make sure that they never have the flu or can become successful or happy, it just really breaks my heart.
But they're not trying to stop 5G. I don't mind. I don't mind them.
True.
I don't mind them doing that.
That is true.
But if Russia and other folk are looking at stuff, and this is not in a bad way, but if you were a government looking to undermine the technology of another government, you'd most probably want to activate their population to say that it's a bad thing. Yeah. Now that's apparently, if you see Facebook and other places, that isn't that tricky to do. But my point to her is quite simple. If it does kill loads of people, then just look to China, who's had it for 5 years.
That's what Taliban did in Pakistan and Afghanistan, the only two countries which still had polio. I think it was only eradicated 2 years ago in Pakistan, because they said that the polio, the vaccine, vaccine makes you sterile, so you cannot have kids, and that's an American conspiracy theory, and the CIA conspiracy to do that. So it was the two countries, my own country, where people still had polio, completely treatable, and people were killing polio workers.
Oh Lord!
Because they saw that, and one of the reasons why it originated was because the U.S. was routinely using polio workers to do stuff. So it just got really messy. But you can see how the conspiracy led to kids,
But my biggest fear there was not the fact that, not saying that it's bad if 5G did kill bees, etc. But actually the bigger danger is actually Facebook and you learning your information from Facebook and not being able to necessarily, because she was going out handing out flyers and going part of this massive protest, and I was like, but you've got it from Facebook. Just have a think first. I'm not saying you need to change your life, but you've got it from Facebook. Oh my God. And I don't think she was the only person, is my point, and that worries me. We should not stop most technologies based on fear. I think we've got to be a bit more positive with it. However, if it does kill bees, I'm so sorry.
The thing with that, though, as well, so the kind of more extreme, it's all a matter of scale. So we might kind of look at the people that fear, that think crystals can cure everything, but actually loads of people take vitamin C tablets and echinacea, and there's literally no scientific evidence to show that prevents anything. So there's more evidence to show that vitamin C gives you cancer than it does stop a cold, but people still do that. But we're fine, because that's got a vitamin and you can buy it from Boots, whereas all the other stuff, we're you're crazy quacks, you fools.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, if it's you just doing it to yourself, I don't mind.
Yeah.
If you're going to retard a whole country based on it, or you're saying, well, no, sorry, not in my street, you can't have the internet.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that? Because I'm allergic to it.
Yeah.
All right. I'll have to step in here.
Yeah.
Someone might have to say, no, madam, that's not your human right.
It is very, very concerning. As I was saying, I just sometimes feel like I don't know what to say when you come across those arguments, because obviously saying that you're crazy or, this is a pseudoscience is not going to convince anyone. It's like people who don't vaccinate their kids. It's insane. The people who are doing that are, educated. Some of them are rich. They have access to all the best advice. It's not just something people often make it sound like, because people don't have education, that's why they believe in these things. But I don't think that's true.
No, it's probably the more educated ones that tend to do that. It's that entitlement aspect where it's well, you're not touching my child.
Okay, yeah, not really. I never thought of it from that point of view. Yeah, maybe it's actually that kind of ultra protective moment where you're saying, actually, I don't believe anyone apart from myself. Yeah. That's interesting. Never thought of it. You see, learn something new every day. Every day is a school day.
Yeah, it's I've had several fights with anti-vaxxers on social media. So
you do?
Yeah,
that makes you like me. Sorry, that makes me like you more. we can be better friends now.
Yeah. My usual response is, can you share me something that isn't like Bob's green tips?
I did wonder.
Or the celery doctor. There's a celery doctor as well.
Oh my God, really? I love celery, actually. It's much maligned.
Do you think it flushes toxins out of your body?
No, I just like it. I just like it. It tastes
That's okay.
good. Dipped in some pate.
You're allowed that.
Yeah. Do we just want to touch very quickly before we move on to the rant stroke nice of the week about Facebook, the less good thing that they did, which relates to what we've just discussed.
Oh no, Facebook! What did you do now?
One step forward, two step back.
Yeah. So after making like quite a strong proactive decision, they're in the process of launching this board, which is supposed to be like their Supreme Court, which is supposed to help them manage decisions like the one about the coronavirus kind of posts. So they're in the process of launching this. You think this is a step forward, but actually what they've done is the first thing that they've said that they will only allow this board to do is decide on posts which were removed in error. Rather than looking at posts that are live and could be potentially harmful, they're going to look at posts which have been removed already. Which, certainly there are some people who have stuff removed which has been done in error, but realistically, shouldn't they be looking at the problems that are out there in the wild?
Yeah, completely. Otherwise, that is a ridiculous way of doing it. But obviously, we just said Facebook first there. I think we've doomed ourselves to think that they were going to do anything that was going to affect their share price too much.
Yeah, it's crazy because you look at like the coronavirus example where they've taken a really strong kind of proactive step. And then they've got this other thing, which, if they hadn't done that and it said, we're going to leave this up to the board to make this decision on all of these posts, but actually we're not going to let them do that for 6 months. Like,
absolutely.
That's genuinely massive impact. So that's just one example. And there's other stuff which is less public that they could be allowing to happen now because they've said, we're going to focus on this section.
And I suppose it's the tricky thing, and you don't want to talk too deeply about these things, but we do presume here that Facebook in some way has a moral obligation. And I think that's one of the biggest presumptions people make. And that's my concern with it, is the fact that people are like, well, what they should do is... No, they shouldn't. What they should do is make as much money as possible for the shareholders.
Yeah.
That's what they should do because they're a capitalistic country in America and that's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what they should do. Now, you should definitely change what they should do with law, but there's no way you're going to do it otherwise because the person will be fired.
See, I've been thinking about this in kind of... So we're trying to wait for governments and people to kind of change the laws and rule them, but essentially they're like a country in themselves.
Yeah, they're bigger than countries.
They have, they're bigger than some countries. They have greater population. They have people who operate in like the EU who are there supposedly as lobbyists, but they're actually treated almost like ambassadors.
Ambassadors, absolutely. Royal ambassador from Facebook, absolutely. Waves. Hello, I've come here to employ people. Well done, thank you. Give me less money, I'll pay no tax. The reality is that if it was all new years ago, if you let any company become bigger than a multinational like that, literally like a multinational, but then on steroids, and you have monopolies, that's the problem. If they become bigger than countries, that's the issue. So you have to break them apart. But then now they won't, and now the big four are so big, and now we're moaning about what they're doing. The only way to do it, and this is, by the way, why I work with tech startups, is because that's one of the only ways to do it, is to have people start tech startups who are nicer. Because that's the point. You start them, they're nicer people, they employ other people. Some of it, that's the point.
But a lot of companies start with the nice ambitions.
I don't think Facebook ever did.
I think it's
he nicked the idea to start off with, did he? Of course he didn't. I'm only joking.
I find that your view is very similar to what I had when I joined the startup world, and of course I am
43, so I've been doing it for 27.
So you have definitely been doing it for quite a lot more years.
He's gone round the other way. He's gone past the hating it all and then back out there.
Exactly. I'm not not there. I don't think I'm there.
You're not on the second hype curve. That's
No, I'm not.
Okay. You're into the chopper disillusion. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a process. You'll be okay. No, I'm joking.
I think it's like this the way our economy works, and it's more about like how we view the role of business in society. I think but things like B Corps and social enterprises and tougher crackdown on things like tax evasion, tax. Not just tax, but looking at, structures, company structures and company behavior, company culture, all of those things I think are a step in the right direction, because it's about how, it shouldn't just be about what a company produces and how much it makes. And I think aligning those things, changing the incentives in the industry will change things, because you might have startup founders that are, well-intentioned. The founder of WhatsApp said for a long time would never sell WhatsApp, but it was sold in the end, and it was sold to Facebook.
Well, again, I think you've got to be careful with the intention work there, because you'd have to have very, very, very bizarre and very strong morals to not take a couple of £1 billion. So
I'm not saying that he did something wrong, but what I'm saying is that it's just
the intention was
the thing is, you can't just rely on good people. You want good people to start good companies, of course, but I think that's not the only way of creating change. It's like we have to change the culture of what it is to be a business.
Well, but also, this is what New Zealand and other folk have done, haven't they? If you look at what they're starting to look at, what's the important bit for society? Because what you're
well-being economy,
exactly, well-being economy. What you're actually talking about is it's not just about pound coins or dollars, and it shouldn't just be about how much money they make. So Facebook's known as a very successful company because of how much money it makes. No one really seems to care how it did that, and in fact doesn't pay tax, etc. Same with Amazon and other folk, and I use those. Brands are not exclusive in the fact they do things that may be slightly morally dubious, but the government have to be blamed slightly because we've kind of let them.
Yeah.
And then we've got to be slightly blamed because we kind of use them.
Yeah.
So the reason why I work with tech startups to help them grow is actually because I think that's one of the quickest ways you can change tech culture is by infiltrating it with nicer, smaller companies.
I love talking like analogies and metaphors and stuff, but it's like cooking basically, like putting the flavors in at the start. You can't put that in at the end and like it tastes it. But how are you going to do that with like Facebook now? It's already a shit curry.
Oh no, absolutely.
It doesn't have any
all you can do is
yeah.
spoon it out into different plates and then add other stuff to it and split it up.
If the other portions are all working well and I do taste good, you could mix that in with Facebook and make that work.
Where did we go with that analogy?
I was watching that baking show last night, the cooking thing, and they said exactly that. And I was like, yeah, this is exactly it. But startups that do have the right morals at the start can make all that work. So.
Yeah. That is exactly what I'm all about. Of course, it might not be the only way to change it. My concern is that when people say they're going to change the culture from the inside out, they can become that very culture they're trying to change. So this is how you get institutionalism and other things. Anyway, we're going off topic there. Sorry. Told you.
Are we, Greg?
Yeah, probably a little bit.
Don't want to be that guy, but yeah, maybe just a little bit.
So tell us, Greg, what is our rant of the week? Is it a rant or is it a nice of the week?
I don't know. We need to decide by the end of this few minutes segment. So digital IDs. There's a lot of progress happening with these. There was some research conducted by the Engine Room looking at the lived effects of digital IDs, particularly amongst marginalized communities in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and Thailand. And yeah, it's a tough one because it could provide such brilliant benefits, but at the same time, you've got all these risks. And there is really a massive balancing act, because who in this room would trust our government with a ton of personal information for them to protect and also monitor us with? I'm not sure I would, but then at the same time, it's kind of like...
Would you have any choice?
In a way, they already have that on you. Your passport number.
This is the bit I don't get with lots of the conversation when we talk about privacy and these concepts. Because actually, again, it was a 20-year-old conversation. People talk about Britain and say, "Oh, well, we don't have facial recognition like we do in China." No, we do. It's just not as good.
Yeah.
But we are the most CCTV nation on earth, just about, and America are pretty bad at this as well. Yeah. And yet we always look somewhere else. So, it's them not over there. That's the people. That's the problem. Digital IDs and your rant is a great point, though. But I think it points to a deeper thing. Yeah. So if you look at digital IDs, that's just a start, isn't it? It's what if they know everything about you? And the thing is, they do. It's just not the government. And I think that's worse.
Yeah, definitely worse.
Because the government might be a little bit mean and might want to control me, but those guys just want to make money from me as quickly as possible and don't care if I live or die. Now that to me is that's actually worse than the rest of it. We give Facebook all this information, and you go, "Oh, would we give the government?"
I mean, at least they they make money off it. The government wouldn't make money off it. They'd just use it to abuse your rights in some way.
Yeah,
like really boring.
This isn't a nice rant at all, is it? No, okay, go on.
Yeah, just really boring stuff instead of making some. At least Zuckerberg's sat in Hawaii, like sunning himself off the back of our pay.
I bet he's not, He's
like,
not boring,
instead, you've got, the blooming Tory government sitting down in London looking miserable and confused.
So is your point around the use of data? Or is it because the government use it in boring ways?
Yeah, I mean that at first, like if you're going to be evil, at least be creative.
At least be cool with it. Exactly.
Yeah.
At least do it for money.
Yeah.
But there's bigger. I know that sounds awful, but I think you're kind of going against it's just inevitable, that future. And I know it sounds bad, but the future where the government has all your information. That's inevitable.
Yeah.
It already happens anyway. It's how efficient they are at it.
But it is not as linked. And I think the thing with digital IDs is that it is giving IDs to people who can be marginalized, stateless, all of those people who have further. So an example a good example is from India, where there's been a huge process of digitization. And I think that most economists and researchers thought it would be for good, but it has led to a lot of chaos, and especially based on the fact that now government knows how many people came from certain parts of the region. There is like mass discrimination happening to people who live in the east of India based on their ethnicities, and
so it allows the government to become more if they are
data driven.
Racist,
is exactly
they can become data driven racist, become more efficient racist.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So I think you are right.
Terrible.
It is inevitable, but the good thing about the engine room's research is that one of the things that they talk about is intentionality. Is that the government should know what is their purpose for collecting this, not just collect it because they can and then they'll see how to use it. So it's about restraining the government's right to use that in certain ways. And one of the things that they talk about is that in Nigeria and in Zimbabwe, a lot of people just did not know why this was happening. So they, as citizens, they just did not know why their government was moving from a metal ID to a biometric ID. So there's also disempowerment in that process. So one of the points they make is that the process of getting a digital ID is just as important as the results of it, because the government wants it for various reasons. They want to make sure they can give benefits to the right people, know who's doing what where. I get all of that. But I think we sometimes miss this fact about how, a government's relationship with its citizens has to be one of like support, empowerment, protection. And the way you go about these programs can often not feel like that.
But that's often a kind of a marketing problem, and also because a lot of governments, by their very nature, are slightly arrogant because they tend to run the people, and I suppose it depends how developed that system is. I think underneath it, perhaps, is a deeper point, which is around this. It's the trade-off, and I think it might be a generational thing as well around this whole idea of privacy and other things, which, by the way, are concepts we've created. So sometimes we've got to be really careful because we go privacy, human right. Absolute human right privacy. No, there isn't. There's absolutely no human rights privacy at all. We've made one up. You could argue it. You could argue it. No, but we made it up. Like, okay, so where did the concept of privacy come from?
Well, it's one of the 14 articles, and one of them is right to private life,
which is made when. Like, was it when human beings came out from trees, or when did we?
Can't remember.
Was it 100 years ago? 200 years ago?
But then everything that we've come up with is man-made.
No.
We live in rules made by man.
But we then start to get very, very possessive over these moments. Like you're right, which you just did then, which is brilliant. The 14 articles. I've no idea when those 14 articles were, but they found
sometime in the 90s.
They sound fascinating. I mean, you could say, but it could be the Protestant Reformation Act, and it actually comes from the Enclosure Act, the idea of privacy, because the idea of the non-common land and those boring things I'm now not going to talk about because you find them tremendously boring. But that's before those times. I'm just saying that sometimes when we look at tech and things and we say, oh, privacy is going to be an issue here, actually privacy might be the problem. I know no one likes that. No one likes that at all. But it might be actually we want to be much more open with all of our data. Like in health data, we want to be a lot more open with all our health data. And some people fundamentally hate me for saying that. But I think there's an efficiency to the model because it's the opposite way around.
There definitely is an efficiency to the model, but I think that's where Greg and my point was around intentionality. Is like if so I think people,
how would you know?
Well, if the government is clear about how if NHS did not get into that whole problem with selling data without people being aware of that, I think the conversation in the UK would have been very different. Okay. It's around consent. I think consent is very important, and also informed consent. So I think these are the reasons I'm very happy for my health data, my tax data, all of this stuff to be open. But I want it to be in an environment where it's an environment of trust. So not just I trust my government, but also I trust my fellow citizens that when they see that, it is received as a productive addition.
You mentioned a Norwegian model earlier. My partner's from Norway, and she absolutely loves it. The fact that she's got one single place to do all this with, because she trusts her government to do it, whether she's right or wrong. But the fact is, she tells us about that and is absolutely happy with that.
A lot more sense.
Think the same thing. We think the same thing, and then talk about the private. That's where your point makes more sense. That exactly that point of trusting your government, and then your point about trusting the government comes into play. So if you trust them and you want that because of the convenience, that's where a lot of these products come from.
That's where the massive revolutions and all this stuff are going to come, isn't it? When we give up data much more quickly, and unfortunately, it's going to come. There's going to be byproducts of all this stuff. Yeah, and I've talked about this a bit when I talk about the industrial revolutions. There's always a byproduct, and there's going to be some bad stuff. I'm not saying the industrial revolutions are good, but there's going to be one. We all know it's going to happen, and the next jump, we hope we take as many people with us as possible. But there will be a leap forward, and most of that will be around data, and it will be how you use that data and how AI uses that data, and also how you live for longer. Now, that's going to be the biggest leap, is going to be in health and how long you live for. That's going to be the differential. It won't necessarily be how rich you are. And what I fear is that people will hold on to their private data and go, no, I want my privacy. And they're the people that will die because they've held on to their data.
Yeah, and they can't be treated more. I think you're perfectly right. I don't think it's a controversial thing to state that there is a huge conflict between the need for privacy, but also at the same time, the huge benefit that we could gain from more open data. And that is a conflict that's going to rage on for a while. I think where the revolution is going to come through is that shift of that balance of power and that balance of knowledge from a bunch of very well-off, privileged guys in America taking advantage of all that data to the individual owning that data and making active decisions about how it's going to be used.
Well, that's what you want, isn't it? You want it to become the quantified self, so you get really geeky about your stuff.
Yeah.
That will be hopefully the future, not only of work, but also of health.
Perfect.
Well, on that note, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening. Dan, how was that for you? And where can people find you online?
You'll find me online. Normally I work at The Landing, so thelanding.org.uk. Greg, you beautifully talked about Flock, so www.yourflock.co.uk. Find me on Twitter at UK Marketing Help and Dan Sodergren. And I thought it was amazing. My apologies for some rather bizarre rants halfway through.
That's what we're all about. So no need to apologize for that. Listeners, what did you think? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch with us on Twitter at Tech4Good Live, or on Instagram, same thing, or email us at hello@techforgood.live. We'd love it if you give us a nice iTunes review so that I can show it to my mother and my aunts and uncles and second cousins, because I'm Pakistani, so we have loads of them. And I can also tell my friends about this podcast. And if you want to get more involved in our community, you can join our Slack channel. This is where we find news, and you can visit the Tech4Good Live website to find out how to join Slack. Thank you to the wonderful Podcast.co for hosting us in a beautifully mirrored studio, which you can't see, but it is pretty, as we say that every week.
And extremely warm.
Yeah, it's like being in a sauna.
It is. If you want a free sauna visit, come and join us. If you want to create a podcast, you can find out everything you need to do at podcast.co. We'd also like to thank Happy Porch for their sponsorship, which will allow us to have these episodes transcribed, helping us be more inclusive and accessible, which is really important to us. Happy Porch provides strategy, technology, and development for purpose-driven organizations. You can find out more about them at happyporch.com. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.